Welcome, fellow Scale shipbuilders, to the launch chapter of Walker Street Shipyards. I'm Scott, and this is going to be my build series for my second build of the Polar Lights 1350 Scale Refit Enterprise. I finished this build January of 2023. It had been about a 9-month build. I enjoyed the build, and I learned a lot during the process. I've enjoyed building model kits for decades, and up to recently mainly built resin, styrene, and PVC figure kits. When Mobius Models released the 124 scale Lost in Space Chariot, I could not resist getting back into spacecraft. Lost in Space was a big part of my childhood, and I always thought the design of that show's hardware was just so cool. I built the Chariot 3 summers ago, and it was the first science fiction vehicle I had built in many years. I enjoyed the build and was very pleased with the finished kit, and it gave me the confidence to take on a kit that had been given to me as a gift and had been gathering dust in a closet for almost 20 years. The Polar Lights Jupiter 2. That was the first kit where I designed a scratch-built lighting system, used aftermarket parts, learned to solder, and learned about making internal body modifications to accommodate wiring, lights, and the power systems, 9-volt batteries. Based on that successful build, I felt confident that I could take on this monster of a kit. I've always loved the Starship Enterprise, especially as we see it in Star Trek The Motion Picture, and especially as we see it in the wonderful dry dock sequence. I had wanted to take on the build of the Polar Lights 350 refit as soon as they first started posting pictures when that kit hit the market. So I eventually ordered one from Steve at Cult TV Man Models, did some research on what basic aftermarket products were needed, and ordered also the Polar Lights Aztec decals. I wanted to light it, but when I first got it, I had no idea what that would take, and I had to learn that process. Now, this is a huge build, and not just because it's it's almost 3 feet long when finished. And not just because there are more than 200 parts. There's a lot to this kit, and it's really like building several model kits. In addition to all of that, there's a stellar array of aftermarket products specific to this kit, including decals, paint mask, lighting kits, replacement parts, photo etch enhancements, and more. And different companies make different versions of the different parts, so it's a little bewildering just figuring out which ones to choose from and how you're going to implement them into your design and build process. I ended up building a scratch lighting system which mostly used LED strip lights with a few LED colored bulb lights for things like the navigation lights, the deflector dish, the impulse crystals, and the impulse engines. Everything gets juiced by a single 12-volt transformer that I ordered from Evans Designs. I also got a lot of the single bulb LEDs from Evans Designs. They're an awesome company. So this was just my third vehicle and my second attempt at lighting systems. And I'm not an electronics person. My learning curve was not so much steep as, well, vertical, and I just had to figure it all out as I soldered, not to mention soldered, through everything. Critical to navigating that learning curve, as well as overcoming this kit's numerous issues and design flaws, were some excellent YouTube build series, like the one that I'm launching now. Boyd Compton's excellent Trek Work series had great tips, but was really aimed at a modeler with more advanced skills than me, especially at that time. The series that helped me the most was Matt's Model Shop build series of the 350 refit. Matt's series was aimed more of a middle skill level builder like myself, and it's where I learned about using the LED strip lights, how to place the Aztec decals, and some other essential construction techniques and methods to overcome this kit's many problems. So now that I'm taking on a second 350 refit build, you might say it's my refit of my refit, and I want to make a build series aimed at the middle skill builder like myself. Now, why build another one of these challenging, often frustrating kits? Well, I wanted to do more cool stuff. The lighting system for this is a static lighting system. I'm pretty pleased I was able to figure out how to cobble one together and make it all work, but it's a static lighting system. It turns on, it turns off, there's no blinking lights, so there's no automation, and I wanted to do more. Also, despite the many frustrations, on the whole, it was a rewarding 9 months build, and it was filled with discovery and little victories, and I'm really pleased with the finished ship. So this will be a journey and a journey of discovery. Not only am I taking on a second build of this, but I'm taking on learning how to use advanced circuitry board to make automated lighting systems and blinking lighting systems, and on top of all of that, I'm learning how to make my first build series. I'm hoping this will be a build series that will help other modelers, and maybe you'll just enjoy watching me fumble my way through it, or just say, well, I'm not going to do things that way. So if you come with me on this journey, fair warning, there may be some cursing, but I'll do what I can to keep it to a level that if Kirk wouldn't approve, well, Scotty might. So let's crack open the box and see what's in this. Here are just a few of the figure kits that I've enjoyed building over the last several decades. The Vampirella kit was the first figure kit that I got back into after building the 350 Refit Enterprise a year ago. As much as I was enjoying building figure kits, when Mobius Models released this 1/24th scale Chariot kit from Lost in Space, I really wanted to build it. Lost in Space had been a huge part of my childhood. I loved the design of that show, and I really loved this vehicle. So I got it. It took a couple years to build up the courage, do a little bit of research, try to figure out how the masking takes place. Many thanks to Lou Del Maso of Aztec Dummy Masking Designs, who provided some really great masks that made it possible to paint all of the strut work on that huge chunk of clear canopy. After building this, I decided that I had the courage to take on a kit that had been sitting in my closet for almost 20 years. The Polar Lights Jupiter 2 from Lost in Space. This kit came out, I believe, around 2000. This kit came out, I believe, around 2000, and like I said, it had been sitting in my closet. But after the Chariot, I thought maybe I have got what it takes to build this kit. This was also the first kit that I took a real stab at developing a lighting system. So what went into that first lighting system that I built? Well, it was my first attempt at learning how to solder wires. It was my first attempt at making body modifications to the walls to include the LED lights. But I'm still pretty proud of how it came out. Just 4 9-volt batteries, again soldered onto mostly LED lights with a pulsing strobe to reproduce the fusion effect of the engines, which are on the bottom of the ship. And so here's the completed build of my Polar Lights 1/350 scale Refit Enterprise. Completed and launched about this time a year ago after a 9-month build. I'm really pleased with the way that it came out, especially since I had so much to learn and so much to overcome during that first build. I really love the way it looks when it's lit up. The lighting is mostly internal lighting with LED lighting strips. There is a few single bulb LED lights and a few LED mega lights. The deflector dish is going to be a single bulb LED. The impulse crystal is a pale blue megalight. I really like the way this kit looks when it's lit up in the dark. It is a thing of beauty. And you can see all the masking that went into building the bridge dome component. There's that pale blue impulse crystal the impulse engines, and of course the warp chiller grills. One of the coolest and most fun parts of this build is the shuttle bay, which I sometimes refer to as the garage. There is a lot of detail that goes into the shuttle bay, and you also get some really cool little ships that come with it. You get long-range intersystem shuttles, you get a deep space shuttle like the Vulcan warp shuttle that we saw in Star Trek the Motion Picture. You get a lot of little work bees, and you also get travel pods. Problem is, the more things that you put into the shuttle bay, the more obscure it is, and you lose a lot of the details. It's a shame that you can't see as deep as this thing runs. It's 3 different levels, and there's a lot of great stuff to look at in there that you unfortunately just never see. Still, it's a fun part of the build and one of the first things that you knock out. So before we start the assembly process here in the shipyards, let's take a brief inventory of maybe some of the larger major parts. We've got our Enterprise shaped lamp right here that's going to cast a little light on things, maybe with the help of the blue glow from the deflector dish here. So just looking at the lower saucer here, you can tell already that this is going to be a massive build, a massive kit. There's going to be an awful lot to it and an awful lot to do. And taking a look at the upper saucer, with your bridge mounting area, your impulse crystal assembly, impulse engine assembly, your pins. So one of the things that's recommended for all model kits, not just this Enterprise, not just space kits, is before you get started, take all of your parts and give them a good bath in some warm water with some dishwashing suds, and then wipe them down really well, because model companies use mold release agents in their molds so that the plastic parts will crack out evenly, but what that sometimes does is it leaves a residue which may actually bleed through some of your paint. Some kits, when you run your fingers over them when you first take them out of the box, particularly a part as big as this, they feel a little bit slimy and a little bit greasy. This kit, something I hadn't seen in other kits, is there was actually some type of brown schmutz, some type of greasy finish that I could run my fingers over and would smear around. I've still got to come back in. I've washed these parts, but I still need to come back in and really take care of that. That's not something that I would want to bleed through, even on the underside where I'm going to have my primer coats and then my light blocking. You see we have our large nacelle pieces, which finish at the back of the ship. This is where your chiller grills are going to run. Your strong back section, your locking struts, which is where the nacelle struts are going to lock in. We're going to talk about more about these in the next chapter. There's a little bit of body mods that need to take place with these, or this back piece never will go together right. One of the things about this kit that I think is a little bit silly and a little bit unnecessary, but in the end has some practical uses, is you get 2 of these bottom assemblies for the secondary hull, so that you can choose between which version of the Enterprise you want to build. You can have the regular NCC 1701 Star Trek the Motion Picture build, or you could have the 1701A or perhaps B. The only real difference between these 2 pieces is that the A piece, the letter pieces, are more scribed right down in here. So I'm a big fan of reproducing what you see in the movie. I want to go with the Star Trek the Motion Picture version of the Enterprise. I'm not a huge fan of the whole A, B, C letter thing. But there's a very practical usage for whichever piece you don't use, you can use as a test piece. It's a big piece, it's got a lot of surface area. So you can use it as a test for if you're trying to figure out which type of paint you want to use or which type of finish you want to end up with. You can use it for these. You can also use it as test pieces for your decals. On my Jupiter 2 kit, I used some aftermarket decals. It really gave me a lot of trouble. They kind of dissolved when I placed them in water, and if I did manage to get them onto the surface of the wall, sometimes they would break and crack apart. So I wanted to have a piece that I could test some of the decals. You have some variations on the decals, different colors, different numbers and things. So for some of the decals that I decided not to use, I was able to put them on here and really get a good feel of how they hold together, how they lift out of the water, and how they go into place. Then, of course, one of the first pieces that you probably will end up building is going to be your shuttle bay assembly. This is your landing pad. These are your walls. Okay, there's a roof part that will go over all this that has really a great, well-engineered area for light to come through and light up the entire shuttle bay. This piece right here is really an essential, important piece. This is your collar that will go on the front of the secondary hull, and as you can see right here, this is your support piece that the support rod will run up into. In other words, this is the most weight-bearing piece of the entire kit. This piece holds the entire weight of the kit right here. So it's a very important piece. Here's your lower hull planetary sensor. Some of these pins, if you decide to light the kit and you want to have some type of light projection effect coming out, you're going to have to remove these struts, these support pins, so light will have a chance to exit out of there. We'll talk about that in a later chapter. So this is your bridge dome. There's this kind of odd like blue effect on this bridge dome. I'm not sure what that is, but it doesn't really matter because I have ordered an aftermarket piece that is a reproduction of this with some improvements. One of the problems with this standard kit part is as it's placed at the top of the bridge dome assembly, it does not leave a lot of room for light to project out onto your registry markings. And so there's a piece that actually raises it up a little bit. Some people actually go in and remove these ridges right here, will sand them out, and then actually push the bridge dome assembly piece towards the front. I'm not going to do that type of major modification. Again, like I said, I've ordered an aftermarket piece. So now let's get into some finer details. Speaking of your shuttle bay, this tree here has these tiny little work beads, 6 of them, and as you can see they're pretty small. I think doing the detail paint work on these would be pretty daunting. Fortunately, HDA Model Works has a decal sheet specific to a lot of the parts in the shuttle bay, including these little work beads, and those decals have your little windshields and as well as some registry markings and things which really help bring the work beads to life. You also have your intersystem long range warp shuttles, and these are the bottoms of your work beads. The top of the work beads are actually a clear acrylic part. On this tree we have these, which are the deep space, very long range warp sleds. Now your instruction sheet is pretty good. It's mostly a great guide listing all the parts and detailing where what sequence they all go in. It's mostly a good sheet. In some cases there's some detail that is just not great. For example, your impulse crystal, it really is a little bit ambivalent as to whether it goes
into the top or whether it's mounted up from the bottom. It's really hard to tell. One thing, as someone pointed out in the 1350 Refit Facebook group, is the majority of your acrylic clear pieces all mount from the inside. Didn't realize that on my first build. I went back and forth trying to decide whether this would go in on the inside or go on the outside. Finally sealed up the saucer portion and left it out and realized that was a mistake. Had to mount it on the top, and it doesn't look bad, but it's still not quite right. Now the base for this kit is really great. It's very large, it's very solid. There's some great options that you can do for painting it, and you've got these windows here that come with decals that are the standard decals that come with the kit, that reproduce sort of the stained glass lighting effect that you see in the panels for the dry dock in Star Trek The Motion Picture. Now the kit also comes with this solid steel rod which goes in here and mounts to the locking collar that we talked about earlier, which is what supports the ship. However, it's a solid steel rod, and a lot of the folks who like their kits, what they'll do is you can order from a lot of different places just a regular hollow steel tube, and you run all your lighting down through those tubes. That's what I did. Then they'll come out through this nub at the bottom after you've shaved it off, and as you can see, there's a lot of space down here in your base to run a lot of your wiring and to put in switches. Some folks put in your circuitry boards and Arduinos and things all down here in your base. So let's talk about aftermarket pieces. This piece right here, and I am gonna zoom in for detail, give you a nice focus. This is the kit supplied officer's lounge. I used this piece when I built my first 350 Refit Enterprise, and it's an okay piece. There's some detail work in here and here, but as you can see right here, there's this entire little room that's behind this wall. This wall is about half of what you see when you look through the rear window on the rear of the upper saucer. You don't even see into this little room at all. It's completely obscured. It is sort of like wasted space. So for this kit, this time I ordered the Shapeways Aftermarket Officers Lounge. There are several different companies that make aftermarket officers lounges. Green Strawberry makes an excellent one. It really just depends on which configuration that you want. I like this one the best. There's a lot of great detail in here. It's very open. There's a window back here that you can do some lighting. You've got little couches and things, and you can put some greenery. There is another tiny little room. It's much smaller than the standard kit piece. Again, a little room that you don't see, and it even has a little conference table that you'll never see. But this would be a great area to mount some lighting that would bring some lighting in through there. And this is the decal sheet for the HDA Model Works Shuttle Bay parts. You've got your little decals that are for your work bees that have the little windshields and registry markings. These are the decal sets for your long-range deep space warp sled. These right here are for your inner system shuttles, and these right here are for your floor markings for the shuttle bay landing area. And then we've got the Paragraphics photo etch set. Now, the first time that I built my 350 Refit, I had seen these Paragraphics photo etch sets for different models and for the 350, and I really was a little unsure as to how they are implemented into the kit, and I didn't use them. As I built the kit and watched more of the how-to video series, I began to understand that they really do a lot of enhancement to your build. These are girders that go into the walls right in here for your shuttle bay. There's also like little guardrails that will go along in here. just adding a lot of detail to that shuttle bay. These are your pieces that'll be your walls for your arboretum. This piece right here is going to be your rec deck that folds into place. You've got your impulse engine grills that add a lot of great look to the back of your impulse engine, particularly if it's lit up. This piece right here is a great piece. It's a little bit difficult to see, I know, but it is this ring that goes around the outside of the deflection crystal, and it really adds a lot of pop to that. You've got these, which are your cargo boxes that fold into place. I'm not the biggest fan of those. I may not use them because these places here, right down in here, these two levels for your shuttle bay, you really can't see them. And it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to spend a lot of time building things that you're going to put down in there, which is the only place that I can think of that your cargo pieces are going to go, because then you can't see them. And if you put them up in here, then you really can't see back into the shuttle bay at all. And then HDA also makes this decal sheet that's specific to the Paragraphics photo etch. This is your decal that will enhance your rec deck. These are your decals that are the walls for your arboretum. These actually will enhance those cargo box pieces that I probably won't use. Still great looking decals. And so now we're going to take a look at what for me is going to be the biggest voyage into unexplored territory. Like I said, the lighting system that I scratch built for my first Enterprise build was just the perfect thing for a novice like myself to come up with. And it is a static lighting system. It turns on, it turns off. There's no automation, the lights don't blink or anything like that. But it was the system that I could best figure out how to build at the time. Now I want to do more, and that's going to be possible if I can figure out how to use this. This is a circuitry board from Tenna Controls, and it's going to offer a lot of automation for the ship. It is going to have blinking red and green navigation lights. It's going to have some blinking lights on the front and the back and the underside. It's also got a whole power-up sequence that simulates what you see in Star Trek The Motion Picture as the ship first goes into impulse drive and then ramps up into warp drive, where the navigation dish starts as amber and then changes to blue. The impulse crystal will get more intense, become blue. The impulse engines will glow red, then switch off, and then the chiller grills on the nacelles will turn bright blue. And a lot of this is timed. So I'm really looking forward to the learning curve for this. This is the detail wiring instruction. I have a lot to learn to see how I'm going to hook all this up. Fortunately, I've got a very good friend who is in computer programming and writes code, and one evening I think he's just going to come over and we'll drink beer and go through this, and he will walk me through it step by step to make sure that I get it all right. And then the final thing, we have the Aztec decals. Now, as I understand it, this decal set, which is a 5-sheet, very detailed set that really helps bring out a lot of the paneling for the ship, was originally included in the first, if not the first, 2 release versions of the Polar Lights kit. There are decals that are made by Polar Lights, and again, I believe that they were included in the first 2 versions of the kit, but maybe there was a cost factor because they ended up taking them out and then selling them separately. It's a fairly expensive set of decals. It's about $75 or $80, but I used them on my first build, and they really add a lot of depth and a lot of detail to the kit. They're also a great set of details in that they are fairly durable. They're very easy to use. They don't tear easily. They're pretty easy to put in place. So I highly recommend. There are other ways to come up with the paneled Aztec effects. We'll talk about that when we get to painting. But I highly recommend thinking about using these decals. They are really worth the money. So that wraps up the launch chapter for Walker Street Shipyards. A few things I want to correct that I got wrong in my ramblings. I said that these parts here on this tree are the bases for the work bees, and they have acrylic tops. They are actually, and you probably figured it out, the bases for the travel pods. These are the work bees, which I don't know how I got that wrong since I've talked about these work bees so much. These are actually the bases for the travel pod. And then, speaking of bases, in talking about this piece, and I mentioned the fact that a lot of people order these aftermarket hollow steel tubes. I said that some builders run your lighting down through the tube, which is of course very silly. No one would do such a thing. They run the wiring for the lighting down through these tubes. So for the next chapter, I'm going to get into body mods, mostly for the saucer, also along the spine and your nacelle strut locking tabs. Some pretty necessary revisions that you need to make sure that the kit goes together. So we look forward to seeing you in Chapter 2 of Walker Street Shipyards.